In this video I'm going to walk through the procedure for removing the factory rear fender and installing the Vagabond Motorsports Fender Eliminator kit for the new 2016 Honda CBR500R. Just going to start off by going over the key components and details of the Fender Eliminator kit that we've built specifically for the new CBR500R. The primary component is going to be the Fender Eliminator body. It's CNC laser cut and bent from aluminum coated in a UV resistant black satin powder coat. It's going to have fully joined flanges with pressed in stainless steel studs from Penn Engineering. It's going to have accommodations for both the factory turn signal and that oval slot, as well as aftermarket turn signals that use a very common 10mm stud. It's going to pick up all the interfaces for your factory license plate light, so the OEM quality kind of comes through this whole installation. As for the license plate portion of the Fender Eliminator, we're going to have slots to pick up the top 2 bolts of your license plate, and then 2 rubber bumpers that are going to totally eliminate any kind of license plate buzzing and specifically license plate cracking that other Fender Eliminators can give you kind of under the license plate bolts. The other components that are included in the kit are 4 M6 locking nuts. They've got captive lock washers on them, also called K-locks. We've got 2 CNC laser cut and powder coated aluminum spacers. Those are going to help for the installation of the OEM turn signals. They're going to thicken up this flange such that you get a really nice tight installation. This kit also comes with 4 machined aluminum spacers that are going to slide over the 4 studs to tighten up the whole installation and create really nice body lines on the motorcycle. And then you're going to get 1 additional rubber plug, and that's going to be used to plug 1 hole in the underside of the motorcycle and keep any kind of water or dirt ingress from happening. As for the tools you'll require for this installation, you're going to need a Phillips and a small flathead screwdriver, a 5mm Allen key. You can either use the one in the factory toolkit under your seat or a T-handle like this. You're going to need a 10mm box end wrench. You will need both an 8 and a 10mm socket. And as for driving those sockets, you can either use a screwdriver with a square drive, traditional ratchet, or an electric screwdriver. All of those options will work just fine. Start the installation process. First thing we're going to do is remove the passenger seat from the motorcycle. It's going to be in the key slot behind the rider's seat. Twist and pull forward. That's going to get us access to the bolts that hold on the factory fender, as well as all the wiring connections. Now to get the factory fender off, you can see there's 4 5mm button head Allen screws. That's going to connect the whole factory fender to the motorcycle. Before we undo those, we're going to go ahead and take the wiring harness out of the little clip that's attached to the subframe. I'm going to pull back that clear boot, and we're going to disconnect the electrical connectors for the turn signals and the license plate light. And so you're going to disconnect the little white, orange, and blue connectors, and you're going to disconnect them by in your fingernail under that middle tab, lifting up and sliding out. Once you get these 3 blue, white, and orange out, you can leave the big connector. That's for your tail light that you don't have to touch. Once you disconnect those 3, you're ready to unbolt the factory rear fender. So you're going to use your 5mm Allen key. It's easier if you have a long T-handle like this, but if you don't, you can use the 5mm that is included in the fairly sparse factory toolkit. That is a little bit deeper in that space, held down by a little bungee cord. So we've got 3 bolts out. Set those down, and then as you loosen the 4th one, hold it with the other hand so that it doesn't fall or tweak the threads. And so we'll get the bolt out and then slide the whole factory fender back and down a little bit, and then you're going to take those 3 connectors and help guide it out. Once you're done with that whole assembly, you can take to the bench and we'll break it down. First step, once you've got the kind of total factory rear fender assembly off your motorcycle, and we got to start breaking it down, getting the subcomponents off of it. You're going to remove your license plate, and the hardware that you get from your dealer is likely going to vary a little bit from dealer to dealer. On this particular motorcycle, it's with your Phillips head and it's got some nylock nuts on the back, such that you actually do need a wrench on the back side. In this case, the 10mm wrench and the Phillips screwdriver are exactly what you need. But generally speaking, these are all either Phillips or flathead screws, and you may or may not have nylocks on the back. So loosen the bolts required, set your plate to the side for installation back into the Fender Eliminator, kind of the final step. Once you got the license plate off, you're going to flip this fender over, and you're going to notice there's a plastic cover panel that is going to cover all your wiring, and you're going to have to remove that first in order to get to your license plate and your turn signal. So there's going to be two Phillips head screws, one here and one right where the wires come out, and that little dimple in the steel truss structure. So start with those. These are just plastic thread cutting screws, so they shouldn't be very tight. So far, all the hardware is going to be not reused as part of the Fender Eliminator installation. So it can be set aside and kind of reinstalled together if you want to keep your factory or Fender more or less assembled for storage if you ever need to go back to factory spec for whatever reason. So there's two little teeth that are holding in that plastic cover plate. It's useful to use that flathead screwdriver, as mentioned, to pop at least one of them, and then you can get that cover piece off and set that to the side. So once you've got that cover piece off, we're going to start by taking the the turn signals out, and that will make it a little bit easier to get to the license plate. And so for the turn signals, you're going to need to first remove these 10mm acorn nuts that are holding the turn signals on. And so if we start with those, they have a black metal washer under their head. So we're going to want to, at this point, we're going to start keeping hardware. So keep the nuts, keep the little washers, and you'll notice there's a big metal kind of cover washer in there too. We're going to keep all this, but once you've got that nut out, probably useful to start pulling some of the cables free. But once you got the nut out, you can actually pull the turn signals out of the factory or fender body. And so we're going to be gently guide your cables through, remove your turn signal, and we're going to set that piece to the side. We will, for this installation, go through, assuming we're going to replace or reuse the factory turn signal. So the last bit, you can take that kind of large metal formed washer, which we will keep out, and there's going to be a big kind of molded rubber grommet, and you can just grab it and pull it out. And you can see there's a fairly thick portion of this fender that gap is being used for. So that's why we supply excuse me, extra spacers, such that you can shim our Fender Eliminator up to the same thickness as the factory fender, and so the license plate, or, excuse me, the turn signals are nice and snug. They're not going to be able to kind of wobble around, and so that's something you definitely got to look for in your Fender Eliminators, because Honda has a very nice design for their turn signals. I personally feel like they have one of the nicer turn signals as far as OEM turn signals, so they look rather nice reused, but you have to do it right. So we'll pull the second turn signal out, make sure we keep that washer, and then pop that grommet loose. You kind of just pull inward and then remove it. Now the last thing in this factory fender that we're going to keep, because it's also a nice unit, really adds to the OEM look of our Fender Eliminator kit, is the license plate light. And so we're not going to keep all this extra plastic, but we are going to take just the light and its rubber gasket. The easiest way that I've found to get there is going to be actually to remove at first this kind of whole assembly that has the light as well as this kind of extra mount and the reflector mount. And if you look back in the fender you'll see 4 1, 2, 3, 4 Phillips head screws, and those are also the same kind of thread cutting screws, so they shouldn't be ultra tight, but they're a little tricky to get access to, so a decent Phillips screwdriver is going to be a nice thing here, and you can shake all the screws out after you get them, but start by these top 2 and get those guys out, and the bottom 2. You see this hole. Oh, got a couple more threads in there. This whole kind of plate, or sorry, license plate, light, and reflector mount coming out together. Once you've got that out, you're more or less done with the factory rear fender, such that you can set that aside, keep track of all the loose bolt screws you just have taken out. So now that you got this reflector mount out, you can see there's 2 8mm lock nuts kind of buried down in there, and those are really difficult to get to unless you take this mount off separately first. So at this point you're going to use your 8mm socket. In this case it's really easy on a screwdriver style driver. You're going to loosen those, and again we are going to reuse all the hardware associated with this, so keep track of the nuts, and as you see we got 2, those are locking nuts, and then you're going to see we're going to pull the light out. We're going to keep that. See, it's got studs attached to it, but we're also going to keep the gasket and the steel cores associated with that gasket, because it contributes to a really nice mount. So you can push out the steel cores, and then the easiest thing to do is just to kind of peel off the factory gasket. So we're going to keep the gasket, the cores, and the lock nuts for the license plate light. The reflector mount, you can toss it or set it aside or rebuild it back into a complete factory rear fender, but we will not use it for our Fender Eliminator installation. Since we got everything ready to go for the license plate light, we're going to go ahead and start the assembly of the components back into the new Fender Eliminator. So just like it happened on the factory reflector mount, you can see that those features are all replicated in our Fender Eliminator, such that you can take your gasket and feed the little bosses in that gasket through the 2 outer holes. And it might start to look a little funky at first, but you'll feel the little recesses in those gaskets start to kind of click in. And so sometimes it helps to push from one side and kind of unfold it on the other, and you should end up at some point with the nice clean. You can see the gasket is fully popped through and is nicely seated. And it may look a little wrinkly on the top, and you can kind of straighten that out a bit, but what will happen is when you bolt this all together, it'll totally flatten itself out. So once you get the gasket installed with the bushing parts of those actually popped all the way through, you're going to install these steel centers back in. So through the back end of the Fender Eliminator, you're kind of going to gently push them through the gasket. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to push any part of the gasket back through. If you see anything's not quite seated correctly and those little portions of the gasket start to kind of fold back in, just take the steel centers out and kind of start again. So once you've got the gasket and the steel centers installed, you can feed your license plate light through the big central circular hole and then up through this kind of triangular shaped hole, and that's going to be eventually where it feeds back into the excuse me, the tail section of the motorcycle. So we can thread these lock nuts back on, and then again use your 10mm driver to tighten them up. You can go full tight on this. I mean, they're fairly small bolts, so don't go crazy, but you're not actually tightening against plastic. It's a full metal to metal bottom mount. So you can tell at that point you've got the nice factory tail light, reusing the factory gasket such that you got a little bit of vibration damping, you got nice weather sealing, and it looks really, really clean. So now our Fender Eliminator is set up to accept both the factory turn signals and any kind of aftermarket turn signal you can imagine. And you'll notice kind of when you're looking at turn signals that almost all of them use this kind of threaded stud approach. That's normally an M10, so a 10mm metric stud, and they should come with all the hardware associated with that. So usually a big flange nut like this, and that is what these rear pair of holes is for in our Fender Eliminator. So you don't bother with these big slots if you're going to install aftermarket turn signals. I'll show you this really quickly, and then we'll go about installing the factory turn signals, because that's how we're actually going to complete this installation. So you just thread your wiring and your stud through those rear holes. Thread the wiring through the flange nut that should be supplied with the turn signal, and then tighten up the flange nut. And you'll have some ability to kind of point those turn signals as you would like. You're going to run those wires up with your license plate light. And the big thing to notice is that most aftermarket LED turn signals aren't going to give you a nice OEM style connector like this. So they're going to come with bullets, and you're going to have to buy an adapter or splice those connectors on yourself. And then a lot of the LED turn signals are going to require a different flasher relay. And so none of those kind of aftermarket LED retrofit components are included in this kit. We just give you the provisions to install these in our Fender Eliminator if you want to switch your turn signals. So now that we've gone over the aftermarket approach, I'm going to walk you through the installation of the OEM turn signals, which are pretty nice high quality units. And so we supply these extra aluminum spacers, and that's just to build up thickness for this gap. And this is a little bit of a tricky part of the install, but we're going to first install these two rubber kind of bushings into the Fender Eliminator, and they're going to install with kind of in that orientation. So the kind of arrow-shaped opening pointing towards the license plate light, and the big circular hole kind of pointed back towards the front of the motorcycle. So the way that I recommend you install these is you hold that spacer up against the back side of the Fender Eliminator while you kind of start to feed this bushing through, and the idea is you catch the spacer and the Fender Eliminator flange in that part of the installation, in that gap. And trying to get the spacer on after you've put it in at least one thickness is actually kind of difficult. So bear with me, it's a little challenging to do on camera. Well, I'll attempt to show you what I'm talking about. So we're going to start by putting the spacer up against the back flange of the Fender Eliminator, more or less going to center it up, and then start with an A portion. You can kind of cram in one end, and you'll at least get it seated on both thicknesses of the metal. And at that point, kind of just gently, there you go, feed it through. You're going to want it to catch that flange on both ends. You can see it's going to go Fender Eliminator flange, this little extra piece of our spacer, and then the factory rubber piece. And that's really important in terms of getting you enough stiffness here. And so with that, we'll move on to the second piece. Same kind of thing. Hold it roughly in the same alignment and start by feeding one end of that grommet through. And once you've got one end, you're going to use your fingers to jam it the rest of the way home. Now this is probably the most difficult part of the install, so if you get through this part, you are in good shape. You can see this one's hanging up just a little bit. Just got to be patient, pull, and cycle around that slot and you should. Oh, you can see I'm missing. There we go. So, just takes a little bit of work, but so once you got the two rubber bushings in place, you can go back and reinstall the OEM turn signals. And so they look relatively similar, but you should be able to tell left from right. The easy way to tell is there's a screw that holds that lens in, and it's always going to point under kind of the bottom so that it's kind of hidden. But if you're looking from the top of the bike, blue is going to be your right or your brake side, and orange is going to be your left or your shifter side turn signal. And the way that you reinstall them is going to be to thread the electrical connector through that front kind of arrowhead shaped hole. Don't thread it through that center cutout quite yet. Pull it through, and then make sure that the screwed metal part of the turn signal slides into the circular hole in that rubber grommet that's facing towards the front of the motorcycle. To secure the turn signal, you're going to thread the electrical connector through the OEM kind of oval washer. That's going to key in with that boss into the rubber bushing as well, and it's going to slide over the stud portion of the turn signal. And then to complete the installation, you're going to slide over that OEM black metal washer that came as part of the factory Fender installation, and then that acorn nut. And that is going to be the last thing you need to install the turn signal. So you can tighten that nut, and you'll feel it bottom out, and that's actually bottoming out through a stack of metal so that it's actually really secure. So you can give that a nice snug tight, and there's going to be a little bit of adjustment for angle in that slot, and you can always dial that in once it gets on the motorcycle, just to make sure you get it, the turn signal's pointed nice and horizontal. So we've done it with the left, you can do it really quickly with the right, and thread the turn signal connector through the front hole, key in that threaded portion, and then thread in over the oval washer. Make sure it keys in to that front cutout, and then again metal washer, acorn nut. So pretty fast once you get those. Excuse me. Once you get those rubber bushings installed into the Fender Eliminator. So once those are tight, you can feed all your electrical connectors through that central kind of triangular hole in the Fender Eliminator. And at this point, this is ready to get reinstalled back on the motorcycle, or installed for the first time onto the motorcycle. And the parts that you should have left in your installation kit are going to be these 4 aluminum spacers, the 4 flange nuts, and those are going to be used together. So we're going to start by putting 1 aluminum spacer over each stud, and that's going to space the Fender Eliminator off appropriately from the body, and make sure we only are contacting through the metal spacers that are as part of the subframe of the motorcycle, so that we're not crushing any of the OEM plastics, and it should be a really solid connection. So each of one nut for each of these studs, and the one part of this installation we're going to show you right now is the last part of that kit is this little rubber plug. And it's easier to install this now. You could install it after you install the Fender Eliminator, but it's much easier to show on camera. So I'll show you where this goes first, and then we'll get the Fender Eliminator on the motorcycle. So you can see on the underside of the motorcycle there's this rectangular cutout, and all our wires are going through there. And there's also this circular hole that actually provides clearance for one of the bolt heads on the factory Fender. We don't really want to leave that circular hole wide open, because we do need to have clearance on it for fitment of our Fender Eliminator, such that we also want to plug it. So you're going to take that little rubber plug and insert it with the smaller diameter portion first, and it should fit nice and snugly into that cylindrical hole. And just give it a nice firm push up. You'll feel it seat against the flange on the tail section of the bike, and you should just end up with a nice flush appearance. And that's going to stay put just to prevent a bunch of water from getting into the tail section of your bike. Once you got that rubber plug installed, you're ready to put the fender eliminator back on the bike. And you're going to take your 3 electrical connectors and you're going to feed them through that rectangular hole in the tail section of the bike that's just directly behind that circular hole that you just put the plug in. So that is the only opening kind of available for these cables. And it's the same one that the factory Fender used, so we will kind of reuse that interface. So start with your cables, kind of pull at the same time as you're guiding the fender up, and you should be able to kind of eyeball the 4 studs up into the tail section of the bike. And just remember that those you've placed those aluminum spacers on those studs, so that's actually what's making contact with the subframe of the motorcycle. And you can start tightening just by hand, just thread on the 4 nuts supplied with this Fender Eliminator kit. And then I will move the camera over so that we can see the last few steps involved. So get the nuts installed by hand. You can actually run them all the way down until the conical lock washer actually makes contact with the motorcycle. And then we're going to go ahead and grab 10mm socket. So once you've got your electrical connectors kind of out of the way, go ahead with your 10mm socket. Got it on a power driver right now, and just start by snug it up all the nuts. And once you get them snug, you can go ahead and give them just a decent, there's no magic torque spec here, but you'll feel them tighten up, and then the lock washer will hold it on and make sure nothing loosens up. Once you've got the mechanical connection, you go back and reconnect your license plate light and your 2 turn signals. And you'll have a little bit more, obviously there's going to be a little bit more cable involved because you've shortened up all the license plate and turn signal cable runs, but you're going to kind of recreate the same idea from a cable management standpoint as the factory. So you're going to bring the loom back up, use the factory clamp. It's one of those little flexi clamps. You can open it, close it back up against the subframe, and then what you're going to want to do is, shouldn't be too difficult to kind of tuck most of that cabling back under the tail section of the bike. So it should more or less look like how it came from the factory. And you still have plenty of room for storage here, and everything should be pretty secure. That last cable, so just make sure you kind of close that flexi clamp, and that cable loom's not going to go anywhere. So once you got the Fender Eliminator on the motorcycle, the last couple steps are going to be to reuse the dealer hardware as delivered to reinstall your license plate. Then you're ready to reinstall your rear, your passenger seat. Slide that under the tab. Kind of interesting thing with this bike, you do need the key to install the seat back on. And you can tuck that strap back where it came from. So it's good to do a quick systems check. You should see got some license plate illumination, left turn signal, right turn signal. So with that, installation for the Fender Eliminator is complete. Alright, and to close out this installation, let's give you guys a quick walk around of the finished product. You can see there's really nice kind of lines with the factory bike. The plate on the top of the Fender Eliminator kind of tucks right in to the pocket on the factory fender, or the factory undertail. Real nice kind of matching lines, very OEM look with both the factory turn signals and license plate light. Thank you guys for checking out the video. Our products can be found either direct on our website, www.vagabondmotorsports.com, or on Amazon for you Prime members, as well as eBay for you international guys. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.